All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's break down what we heard yesterday. Now, South Africa, we know, is preparing to move to alert level 3 of the lockdown from Monday morning. Under level 3, alcohol may be sold for the first time in 64 days. Now, those regulations will be from Monday to Thursday, the hours of 9 to 5, and only for consumption at home. There'll be no nighttime curfew anymore, and people may exercise whenever they want. Well, I don't know about whenever they want, because I did see they stipulated between 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening. But, you know, during the day you can keep going, but you're not allowed to be exercising in groups. And for those wanting to tie the knot, a marriage certificate may be obtained, but no celebrations. Although religious gatherings may commence, President Cyril Ramaphosa has warned if there's any violation of lockdown regulations, places of worship will be closed. It has also been made clear that it is not the mandate of the army to intervene in domestic abuse. So let's get a little bit of analysis on the latest sakinations with our political analyst, Ongama Mtimka. Good to see you, Ongama. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Leanne, and Sakina in studio, as well as your viewers. Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure. Let's talk to your sort of ideas and what your thoughts are regarding yesterday's briefing.
Sure. So the biggest point of focus for me, Leanne, I think because of the discipline that I am in, is always broadly on the emerging posture that the state is taking as a result of the intervention it's had to make during this COVID-19. And it's shifted from being a very authoritarian state that wanted to be in control of almost every aspect of life in South Africa. And as various levels of pushing back have taken place, it has been exceeding almost every time that new regulations are announced, and assuming a partly consultative posture, but also retaining some of the authoritarian positions which it feels it is still justified to make. So that's the broad framework on which I interpret every development within the country. The extent to which the state moves from outright authoritarianism to showing elements of consultative leadership in a true democratic fashion, and also the extent to which it retains the paternalistic or father-like role, where it feels it is obligated to continue to intervene in certain activities in the country, lest South Africans be not responsible enough to do what is required of them.
And that's a sense that we've gotten all along. I mean, when you bring up this conversation about smoking and alcohol, everybody talking to that and saying, you know, we don't need to be fathered. We are adults. We can make our own choices. And if we choose to smoke, that's our decision. If we choose to drink, that's our decision. It shouldn't be up to the state to decide whether or not we can or can't. And this, I think, has been a very big debate that's not going anywhere, because we're still in this position now. And I want to focus on that for a little bit, is the allowing of alcohol sales now, but still not tobacco. What do you make of all of this?
It's very interesting, Leanne, because one, medical or sort of close biological debates were made about both of these items, what's so-called the syntaxes. One, that alcohol, among other things, weakened the immune system, and therefore the chances that those infected may be able to cope could be severely constrained. And then also that the social spread of the virus might become more if people are going to be under the influence more often than not, because the tendency to want to break the rules may come. So that's one of the debates. And then with the tobacco, it has been closely linked to the functioning of the lungs, and that it may complicate problems. It matters a lot more. Now, the extent to which the state is justified in intervening here is a question of what we interpret to be the role of the state. And I make this point that after the Second World War, there was a very strong emphasis on the state not just being there to protect against foreign threats, but also to assume responsibility for security around, for human security, including against the outbreaks of diseases as we are seeing now, and ensuring that their populations are not vulnerable where the state has got some room to act. Now, we seem to be challenging the extent to which the state can act here, but I think the basis upon which it is doing so have been the focal point, such as, for example, is the medical debate around tobacco really an issue? And the tension also has come, where, especially from SARS, a part of the state, which feels that you could still open because the economic benefits from it justify it. So for me, Leanne, I don't really approach, I'm not going to give a right or wrong answer per se, but I think there's a need to continue to debate the rationale that the state, the basis upon which the state is taking these decisions, noting the tensions between the social aspects in terms of people wanting to drink and the pressure, that they are putting as a result of that, but also what we understand to be the right of the state to protect, even, for example, things like the overburdening of the health system, because the state may justify that the reason why they continue to intervene on areas in which they feel there are risks that the health system can be overburdened is precisely because is the basis for them to intervene on these which otherwise are personal choices which the state should have no business whatsoever in intervening in.
Indeed, and I mean you can argue for both sides of the story, because the allowing of alcohol, it doesn't matter if there's a curfew, because people will they will buy, they will keep it, they can drink at any time. But the reality is, when you talk about burdening the healthcare system, I think and many people arguing to this is the fact that you will find that you will have more issues coming from alcohol and people going into hospital for various reasons, whether it be from abuse, drunken driving, and just the things associated to over drinking as compared to smoking cigarettes. But again, this is a discussion that has been ongoing for a very, very long time. However, what I want to ask you is, yesterday during the press conference, there were numerous journalists that came forward and asked for the scientific evidence as to why they're allowing this. And, the response is, this is sub judice, it's before the courts, we can't talk about it, we can't give you the exact evidence and all of this given to us. Don't you think by now we should have had these facts in front of us as South Africans to say, look, this is what we're basing it on and this is why you can't have it?
Indeed. So where, for example, the state has been transparent about those rationales, there has been enough discussion to ask to actually override it. So one, for example, is around what level of lockdown is sustainable before you have consequences at other levels, which would make the consequences of COVID-19 look like they are small. So that's happened at the economic level, where counter evidence about potential negative consequences at an economic level it rattles the assumptions that the state has made in terms of how long lockdown lasts. So that's what happens when the state becomes transparent about what are the assumptions that inform why certain decisions cannot be made. So you're quite right, Leanne. And the other thing, though, we must bear in mind is that we cannot assume that any sector of society is inherently right about its positions concerning COVID-19. We cannot assume that the state is wrong because they are attempting they are showing undemocratic tendencies. All we need to do is to engage the debates and the facts as they arise and apply ourselves to those, and not necessarily these general, questions and assumptions that we make that because it's interventionist, then it's wrong. So it's important for us to continue to have the debate. And what I like about the posture that the government has shown is that they are open to being persuaded otherwise. Now, the challenge with that is they are also being criticized for precisely that openness to being influenced by other sectors of the state. So you have one side that feels the state shouldn't be budging, to powerful interests in society, be they economic, religious, or other sectors, while at the same time on issues that concern the private, people are wanting the state, are questioning the state's right to maintain that very same posture, which is proposed concerning religious or economic interests.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what a lot of people were speaking to. If you have a loud voice, he who shouts the loudest and has the most power seems to be winning this debate. And let's talk to that, because the allowance of worship from Monday onwards and obviously following guidelines has really opened up a can of worms, so to speak. Do you think that the Command Council actually considered the sort of knock-on effect of businesses saying, if 50 people can go to the church, why can't 50 people come to my restaurant, social distancing and all of this, or even going and married in a church? Because marriage, you can sign the certificate to get married, but you can't have a celebration or go to the church. You can't go to a park, or you can't even walk on a beach where, you can social distance, but you can go and sit in a church. So these are the kind of arguments that everybody's having now.
So going back, Leanne, to the discussion about the state being open about its rationales, so that it can allow South Africans to contribute meaningfully to some of its positions. Nothing explains the can of worms that comes with that, like this one. And by the way, that's not to say the state shouldn't be open about how it's making decisions. So, for example, the economic interests first advanced this idea that they should be allowed to open. And indeed, they were allowed to open. And in that opening, you have up to about 500 people allowed to be in a factory, obviously maintaining certain precautionary measures. And obviously, the same argument would have been made, I don't know if it was, could have been made by those in the religious sector to say, well, if you can allow people more than 50, whatever the number may be, to gather in factories, why not allow them when they gather to worship? And then it's a chain reaction. Those who see the allowing of worship taking place ask questions about, you allow worship to take place, why don't you allow people in restaurants to gather? The point here is that given the period of about 18 months in which the COVID-19 is expected to be with us, we are going to continue to see this, and perhaps the best time for the state to maintain an open approach to being persuaded otherwise is now, when, yes, the numbers are very high, but are not at the levels that were considered peak. And because to try a trial and error approach by the time we reach those levels, which looks inevitable, by the way, holding other things constant. It seems because the growth that we've seen in the past few weeks was despite lockdown. So if you assume that you are always going to have growth of infections, then the best time to actually accede to some of these demands is now, when you can, when you were to test the waters, so that you know for sure that 2 months, 3 months, or 6 months down the line, you know the exact consequences of allowing certain things. Except that to learn from experiences, the most expensive thing, the best thing is to actually learn from the experiences of others, not from your own costly consequence, not from having to bear the consequences yourself.
Let's talk to the Defence Minister as well and the role of the SANDF. Defence Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula said that police and SANDF officials will continue conducting roadblocks at hotspots areas and other things, perhaps limiting travel between provinces, because I know that that's a big thing. So we've been told that 70,000 SANDF soldiers had been deployed in various capacities around the country. Soldiers deployed, include in engineers that can assist with water and all of these things. However, we've also seen the issue with Collins Khoza and the fact that the SANDF have basically, the inquiry had cleared soldiers of any wrongdoing in all of that. So as we open up the country and people start going about their daily business and we start seeing more activity, do you think that this is also going to bring about further problems between citizens and the army?
Yeah, so what troubles me here, Leanne, is the state's non-committal attitude when it comes to enforcing accountability for some of these unfortunate actions by the soldiers, where people were brutalized to the extent that this was flagged also by the international community. So the state is not helping with this non-committal approach, both in the case of Khoza and as well as in general, in terms of what it commits to do with respect to these brutal measures by the army. It's actually reminiscent of apartheid, where somebody gets brutalized and there's evidence for it, but an outcome of an investigation, even if preliminarily says nobody can be held responsible. That's really not. We need to see a lot more leadership there, especially given the tendency of defense forces to want to become law unto themselves. Yeah. So they need to see a strong posture from the state that says those actions will not be tolerated. If they see that government is non-committal, that will give them more reason to actually behave in some of the unjustified ways in which they have.
Interesting, it really is. And also, you talk to the police, where we've seen about 235,000 South Africans being arrested for, breaking lockdown regulations and, as one would call it, petty crimes. And the thing is that the minister coming out saying yesterday he doesn't want to see these South Africans having criminal records. But the reality is they broke the law. So, it's a very difficult situation to find yourself in. But imagine 235,000 South Africans being arrested since the lockdown.
Yeah, and it will be difficult because, we are a democratic country. Yeah. We're not used to control. But the swift way in which they have been acting in these cases gets us to ask questions about what's actually wrong with policing in general, because we don't see this level of efficiency on what we think matters the most as South Africans.
It would be great, and I hope that it continues to stay at this level for those real crimes that we see every single day on the streets of South Africa taking place post-COVID-19. Political analyst Ongama Mtimka, always a pleasure speaking to you, discussing a couple of the new lockdown regulations of level 3 that begin from Monday next week. All right, time for your news. Just a minute after 7 o'clock, Sakina.